Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about the Yeti blimp. This is another useful tool at Town Hall 13, and it can really be used in two ways. The first way is to use it as a funneling technique, which will also pull the enemy CC. And the second way is to use it as a delayed tactic to get the Town Hall when you have to attack a base from a direction where you're not going to path through the Town Hall. So this attack, we are going to use it as a funneling technique. And let me tell you some of the advantages of using this as a funneling technique. So first, it's gonna funnel, right? So in this base, we're gonna drop the blimp right here. The Yetis are gonna take out this section. We're gonna follow up with some baby dragons on the back end. And the main advantage of this type of funnel is since you're dropping ground in there, it's going to pull a ground CC. And right now the meta is either going to be Hound Ice Golem or 3 Ice Golems. We're seeing that a ton. And if you rush into this base and pull the CC then, it's going to stop your troops dead in their tracks. And there's going to be a lot of damage done to your troops while you're dealing with the enemy CC. So the advantage is pulling the CC out to the corner with your Queen Walk so that you can deal with those troops before you actually make it into a part of the base where there's high damage. So that's really the big plus of using this type of funneling technique. And like I said, we're going to drop the blimp right here. We're going to path it to that single inferno. And we're going to take out this chunk. It's always good to aim for a section of the base where you can get high value defenses. An Inferno and a scatter shot, that's a good trade for the Yeti blimp, especially when you're pulling out the CC as well. So once the baby dragons do their work, you basically have this part completely cleared, and your Queen Walk only has one way to go, which is this way. So then we just have to figure out which troop to use with it. And like I said in a previous video, Yetis are basically going to be the best troop when you're just pathing straight through a base like this. So we're going to do a double jump right here. Queen Walk is going to start here. She's going to deal with the CC troops before she runs into any problems. We're going to walk her up here and then send the troops in through the center of the base. The last concern we have to think about is funneling on this side, because the last thing we want to do is have the Yetis go around this direction and just completely fail the attack. So we're going to do the King and a P.E.K.K.A. up here with some witches behind them. That way we have this part of the base carved out. This section down here. So basically you have a nice street for your troops to go through. Just follow them right through the center of the base. And with using any type of spam troop, they only go where you tell them to go. So you want to make sure you have a nice street, a nice channel for them anytime you run any attack where you're just kind of spamming like that. And last thing we want to think about is where we're going to drop the Royal Champion. We'll send her in right here, but we're going to wait a while because the Queen is a big threat to her. She won't make it if the Queen's there. So we'll wait until our Yetis are probably right here so they can pull a Queen in. And once that Queen's pulled away, then we'll send the Royal Champion in and she'll kind of finish off the attack going around here. And before we watch the attack, we'll take a look at some other considerations for this base. So as far as a queen charge goes, for like a queen charge hybrid, your options are to kind of come in from this side and maybe jump in here. It could be done, but I don't think she's going to last long, especially with this Inferno here. It'll probably lock onto her if you do get her into this compartment. And it's just a lot of funneling up here, a lot of troops to get that funneled. For me, it doesn't seem necessary to do such a surgical attack when you have a better option that has a little bit more wiggle room for imperfection. Because I always like to try to pick the easier combos before I check down to some of the more difficult combos. And Queen Walk Hybrid is a little more difficult. So if you can do Yeti Blimp, I would recommend that because there's just a lot of room for error on a lot of the Queen Walks. So let's take a look at the attack now. Alright, so this is a fresh hit, so we want to drop our Scout Loon before we drop the Blimp. So you'll see the Scout Loon goes down, and then the Blimp. Pre-drop the Rage where you think it's going to break, and then you just break it right into that compartment. And as the Inferno destroys the Yetis, the Yetimites are going to come over there and take down the Inferno. We're going to do 2 Baby Dragons to make sure we speed up the funnel. Then your queen goes in here at the top, and she's going to start pulling those ice golems to the corner. And we actually got a little bit lucky on this one because the baby dragons actually locked in on those ice golems, and I don't even think she runs into the ice golems on this attack because they got pulled over there and attacked by the baby dragons. So up here in the top corner, you'll see the king, P.E.K.K.A, and witches coming in to form the funnel. And I think, yeah, I popped the queen ability early because I wanted to save all the rages for the core. And once I got past the king, I didn't really need those at all. So the Yetis come in. They're just going to path right through there. And like I said, it's a pretty easy attack once you get the funnel set. I mean, you basically are just on autopilot. The enemy queen gets pulled in there, so that's when I drop the royal champion. The Yetis are already out of the other side of the base, and they're meeting up with the royal champion. Then at this point, it's basically just cleanup. And that's a lot of these spam attacks. Like 90% of the work has to go into the funnel, and then 10% of the work is just making sure you hit the spells at the right time. But if you're not planning these spammy attacks very well, then you have a high chance of not getting the 3-star. But if you scout the base and break it down, then you have a really good chance of getting a 3-star with some of these simpler, spammier attacks. And now let's get ready to look at another base. And we'll do one more with funneling, and then we'll do one with a delayed blimp to show you how to use that to take down the town hall and when to look for that type of strategy. Yeah, I'm on. Okay, so let's take a look at this base. Right away, like we've pointed out with these other attacks, the blimp coverage is not ideal for the defender. And this part right here, you have some pretty good value for a Yeti blimp. And hopefully it's not trapped up. I think that's the biggest concern. A lot of defenders are getting wise to this now, so you really have to be careful with traps because they're really trying to stop this attack. So a lot of times it's trapped up. So it's really important to drop your Scout Loon. So what we're going to do on this one, we're going to send the blimp in, pop it right here. We're going to get some good value again, and we're also going to pull the CC, which is, like I said, very important for this kind of attack. So that will carve out a nice channel here. And then we can start our queen walk up here, and she'll walk down and then go into the base. So since they have a little opening right here, we won't use a jump, but we just have to be very careful because there's another opening right here. So we just want to make sure these buildings are taken care of so the Yetis don't run into the base and then come out the other side. So our street for this one, let's just remove all these marks. Our street, we're going to have this taken care of. This taken care of. And over here, we'll probably use a king and a P.E.K.K.A like we did on that last attack, and maybe a few bowlers or something. And then the queen's going to come in, and then our street is basically right here. Now let's look at how to open up the rest of the base. I would probably recommend, I think you could probably use a jump or a quake, but I think I'd probably use a quake in this case. These quakes open up, I believe, 9 spaces, and sometimes 10 if you're lucky. I think we used a quake on this one. It's also good to use a quake because you have these high hit point buildings here. So when you can open up 9 or more spaces and you have some high hit point buildings, that's the time you want to use the quake. So we're going to quake right here. Royal Champion's probably going to come in from this direction. And hopefully we get the 3-star. Let's take a look at the attack. All right, maybe it's repetitive, but okay, well, yeah, Scout Loon, but let's go back down here. So you'll notice that I dropped the quake first. It's always good to place your jumps and quakes at the beginning of the attack because you have plenty of time to make it through those. Even if it's a jump, you almost have a minute and a half. So you want to minimize the amount of spell dropping and buttons you have to hit throughout the attack. So you want to make sure you drop those first, because I've seen a lot of attacks where people have maybe forgotten to drop a jump and completely messed up the path. So make sure that you drop your jumps or quakes before you get into the important part of your attack. So down here we had a king, P.E.K.K.A, some bowlers, and I did a rage. I kind of missed the rage, but I mean, it wasn't a huge deal. It worked out fine. I probably could have saved the rage. So the Yetis are going in through that little hole in the wall there, and they really have a perfect path to everything else in this base. Once they get to those expos, we'll send in the Royal Champion, and she'll basically clean up the rest of this base. And again, when it's a well-planned attack, you don't really have to, worry about crossing your fingers and hoping that it triples. There's a ton of troops left over when you get to the end of this attack, so make sure you scout the bases, keep an eye out for what the weaknesses are, and ask for help from your clanmates if you need some ideas. But the Yeti blimp for funneling is definitely something you want to learn, because it's going to be something that is important for Town Hall 13 until a new siege machine or a new Town Hall level comes out. So now let's look at another attack where we're going to use the Yeti blimp in a different way. Oh, and this did triple. There we go. Okay, so Yeti blimp with a delayed Yeti blimp. Let's look at that. Things that maybe you didn't really need to look for when you're using it as a funnel. The most important thing is that you need the Town Hall to be very close to the edge, because you don't want to have a lot of time between when you send in the blimp and when it gets popped. If you have to send it too far into the base, you are probably not going to get the Town Hall, because like I said, the goal of the delayed blimp is to take down the Town Hall when your heroes can't. So whenever I see an exposed Town Hall very close to the edge, I normally try to think of a way to run some type of combo where I can use the Yeti blimp. So in this case, when we're looking at this base, so there's a single target here. You could probably break the wall pretty easily. All of the DPS is packed in this area, so you really want to get your troops into here. Probably can do 2 jumps. I think this area is a little bit too wide for an earthquake, so we'll probably just want to path them straight through. We'll use a double jump because I don't think an earthquake can open up that much. And we don't really have to worry about taking down the town hall because that's the blimp's job. Ideally, we want all of our troops to get into this area so they can finish off the rest of these buildings. So to get them in there, we're going to have to funnel off these buildings on each side. And this is so that the troops don't walk around the outside. We're going to break this wall, double jump, send them straight in. Now, I don't know why. You could probably do this with Yetis as well, but for some reason maybe I had nostalgia for the Town Hall 11 days, but I used just giants and bowlers for this attack. They do kind of make a nice. They get some good splash damage when they're moving through, and with the giants and healers out front to tank for them, it seems to work pretty well. But I think this probably could have been done with a Yeti attack too. So let's see what else we'll save the warden and see where the warden's needed. Looking at it here, the king's out here. We probably don't want to send her in from this direction unless the enemy royal champion is pulled in already, because we don't want the royal champion to take on any enemy heroes unless she absolutely has to. So I mean, I'd probably like to send her in over here, but all right, so I'm dropping a giant first, and he was to distract the defenses. But also, the point of using that was to make sure that we pulled up any traps if there were any bombs. So you always want to do either a test wall breaker or some other type of troop to make sure that the wall you're trying to break doesn't have a trap in front of it. You'll notice I dropped these jumps. I dropped them a little late. Ideally, you want to drop them before you deploy your troops. You know, sometimes it's not always possible, but it's always best to do that before you deploy them. Now, I did an early tome because I wanted to protect my troops from this first scatter shot, and I ended up sending the Royal Champion in the south because the enemy Royal Champion was gone. My troops pulled the CC, and then I sent in the blimp immediately with a rage, and it took it down pretty easily. Now, the one thing you want to be careful with, you'll notice when we talked about those hog attacks, you did have the town hall close to the edge, but you also had the enemy heroes there, and the enemy heroes can do a lot of damage quickly to the Yetis, so you want to try to avoid a Yeti bomb when you have the enemy heroes clumped up. You want to try to make sure that they are kind of spread out, and maybe you only have to take on one, because if you have to take on 2 or 3, your Yetis are not going to get as much value as they would if you didn't have any enemy heroes there. So now let's take a look at one more attack where we delay the blimp. All right, let's do one more attack where we look at the delayed Yeti blimp. And when we look at this base, I want to point out a few things. So number one, there's only one wall between the town hall and the edge of the base. And it's easy to pull any traps with a loon. So you really, this is very safe to blimp this town hall. I mean, I guaranteed you're going to get it. So I think that's the first thing that jumps out about this base is the relative ease with which you can get the town hall with the Yeti blimp. The other thing that makes this a good candidate is the density of these high value buildings in this area. You'll notice that if you just get your troops into this area, you're going to get all the infernos and all of the scatter shots. So that's a pretty good indicator that you want to try to spam the core with some Yetis or something like that. So let's take a look at the spell selection. So you'll notice here we have 9 spaces. So, well, technically 10, but the earthquake, it basically opens up 2 compartments worth. So you'll notice that you have this compartment and this compartment. So the earthquake will open up 2 of those. So anytime you want to open up 2, you're going to want to use the earthquake. So we'll quake so that it opens up here, and then we'll just do a jump in here. And then that gives us access to most of the base. So now we just have to work out the funnel. You really just need to get this archer tower. And then over here on the other side, you probably want to get the cannon. And then after that, you're just going to spam your Yetis, send them in. There's a nice channel here on the side for that side of the street, and your earthquake's going to basically form the other side. And the nice thing about the delayed blimp is you do not have to worry about the town hall at all. Just get your troops in here and let them do their thing, and then send in the blimp once they pull the CC. And it's relatively easy. And like I said, I prefer to use the easier attacks when possible, just because there's so much margin for error with some of the more complex attacks. So the best thing to do is learn how to pick between the easy attacks so that you don't have to master Queen Walk. But if you want to master Queen Walk, that's good too. So let's take a look at other attack options. So if we did a Queen Charge hybrid, my personal opinion is that it's best to get the Town Hall. So you're going to walk her in here, probably. Or I guess you could go on the other side. Maybe jump. It just, you probably, I mean, you may be able to get away with some good value with the Queen Charge. You'd have to try to walk her in there, maybe jump in here, and then try to get both of those scatter shots. Could that work? You have the sweeper, so that's not ideal, but it would be possible. Maybe drop your siege barracks like down here, and then send your hog miners through the core here. It's a possibility, but like I said, I always like to use the simpler attacks before I check them. Okay, so we're going to start this attack with some loons to clear out that archer tower. And then on the other side, we're going to use a P.E.K.K.A. with some bowlers. The quake goes down early in the jump before you deploy your main force. That way you don't have to do a whole lot of extra button clicking when you get into the important part of your attack. Just like normal Yetis and healers with King Queen. With this one, again, I always use the Warden Tome early because I want to make sure that I keep as many of those troops alive as possible when I get into the core of the base. And then once that CC's pulled, we're going to drop the blimp. Nice clean path. They did have an air mine there, but it didn't really do much because it was so close to the town hall. I mean, at that point, it's okay if the blimp pops. The Yetis did a whole lot of damage there. Let's see, what do we have? We have the Queen, King, Warden, and where's the Royal Champion? I don't even think I deployed her yet, did I? Oh yeah, there she is. Yeah, so like I said, it's easy attack. And so these are 2 different ways that you can use the Yeti blimp depending on the base. So scout the base, ask your clanmates for help, and take advantage of these 2 ways to use the Yeti Bomb.